the migration flows of recent years, while considering some significant peaks, remains relatively stable and predictable. However, propaganda statements of some political groups spread a perception of migrants, and many people buy it because of the ignorance of the audience that is not aware why the refugees are escaping their country of origin and what situation are they really into. The refugees are people fleeing conflict and or persecution. The millions of people arrived in Europe throughout the years run away from civil wars like in Syria, political persecution in Eritrea, Sudan, and Gambia, and terrorism like in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Mali, and Nigeria. The Syrians and many refugees that reach the coast of the Greek islands from Turkey have increased. They come directly from Syria, a country that was destroyed after 4.5 years of civil war. The horrible conditions of the camps that are not able to support refugees are obligating the migrants to live in many European countries. It is important to keep in mind that most Syrian families before the war were living in decency. In Eritrea, however, an increasingly fierce dictatorship is in force, and in order to avoid mandatory military service, young people are fleeing en masse. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Taliban have increased their attacks on the civilian population, causing a rise in the number of people fleeing, while in Iraq, the advancement of ISIS forces entire communities to escape. One time, I was in a supermarket in the city of Milan, Italy. A very well-dressed lady in her 30s comes out of the supermarket and meets a beggar. He was dirty, he had a long beard, and 2 plastic bags was all he had. The lady did not ignore the request for a little donation. She stopped and looked at him imperiously. "I'm not going to give you any money because then you'll go to drink." This stereotype is not only amongst younger people. My grandfather himself, born in 1941, whenever he sees an immigrant, has always a bad judgment and has an insult ready for the occasion. The immigrant is too often seen as a poor man who comes to Europe only to find and steal jobs. Indeed, the motives that can drive a man or a woman to face the immigration experience can be many. Nonetheless, it's important to understand that it is very complex to live with people of different cultures because everyone wants to preserve their customs, especially when, in the face of immigration, people fear to lose their own. People like my grandfather, who live in a country with very rich and distinct culture, find really hard to accept a new way of seeing people and things because of the environment that he has lived in for many years. The problem of immigration is therefore a delicate problem. Immigration has an impact on our economic and social life, and unfortunately today there are many tensions because European border countries still have difficulties in managing the migratory phenomenon, mainly due to many Europeans' mentality that has remained somewhat closed, and of course, space is also a big problem. On one side, there is the problem of orienting and adapting to society and a culture that is not the refugees, and on the other side, there is a fear of having to give up a piece of Europe, European identity and culture, in favor of a different one. But this must not stop us from approaching the refugee, because the refugee is not so different from us. Men communicate, men confront, men integrate. The story of men, after all, is nothing but the story of continuous integration. Integration and encounters are simply connected with stories. If you think about it, it's all a circle. It can be approached in 2 ways. You can integrate by denying your culture because you're not satisfied with your own or with your country of origin. And you can integrate more flexibly by assimilating other cultures' aspects, preserving your own but making it known to others as well. Sharing your cultures means if you're distant, you always feel bound to your country of origin. It tells you not to forget. It tells you to become acquainted and to preserve your own culture. But how do we react to the refugees? In a globalized world, it is important to know the refugee, his history and his culture. Because the refugees are here, we face them face to face on buses, schools, supermarkets, and it can be denied the fact that our society is changing. The refugees, the different, if not known, can scare, especially in a historical period like this, and can create prejudices which brings to racism and xenophobia. No new immigrants are wanted, and those who are already present are too often excluded or exploited unfairly just because they are culturally different from us. They are treated as non-people, and few realize that most immigrants do jobs that many people no longer want to do. Today, we talk about immigration, but perhaps we still have in knowing the refugees. Who are the refugees? Who are these people whom we find ourselves living together with? How many could answer this question? Very few. Indeed, I think that differences can be seen in many resemblances without necessarily giving up on one's own culture. Before judging refugees based on their look and their stereotypical intentions, no matter your view on this complicated issue, you need to be conscious and put yourself into their shoes to realize that many refugees have fled their country from war, and their only intention is to integrate and contribute to a better society, and only then will be able to live in a society with less hate crimes and less scared people when the word inshallah is said.